Okay, we're back to putting the components on this board. We found these 220K 1% resistors, and so we're going to measure both of these and make sure they are what they're supposed to be. And that's 220K every day of the week. And that's 220K. We are good to go. And these are the last two resistors that we're going to be putting in the board. And then we've got all of our capacitors ready to go. And hopefully we can zip through this last little bit of this build pretty quickly here. Like I said, the resistors take a little longer to populate the board. And again, this little section down here is designed for using with a potentiometer in case you wanted to build one of these for a power amp that doesn't have a volume control. But more than likely, if you had a power amp with no volume control, you would have this preamp feeding into the preamp that you're using for your amplifier. But again, if you were just going to listen to vinyl and you had a power amp, you could set this up to have the volume control on this device, and then you wouldn't need a preamp, which might be a nice setup for somebody that was just going to listen to vinyl. Or if you were using maybe your other source was a DAC that had a volume control, because you might currently be using a DAC with a volume control into a power amp that doesn't have a volume control, and you would want to have one. Now I just realized that there's a spot right here for a 68K resistor. I'm not sure if I've got one. And honestly, we've spent so much of this video doing resistors. I do not feel bad about possibly off camera soldering in those last two little 68K resistors. Anyway, it's time to put capacitors in. First we have these little mica capacitors. This is 110 picofarad, and the way this board's laid out, it's got slots here for 3 capacitors, but the total capacitance of these 3 capacitors is supposed to add up to 110 picofarad. So I guess you could put multiples of different capacitors in there to come up with that value. Seems kind of odd, but it may be they designed it so it's like, hey guys, if y'all got a pile of these weird capacitors you don't know what to do with, you can put them in this board. So I'm going to put these 110s into the center slot where they're as far away from these other resistors as they can be. And I'm also going to stand them up just a little bit so that they're away from the board, just like I've done everything else. And then we have, and this is all part of that RIAA network, we have these two. These are 330, and the 330P goes down here on this end. So we're going to bend both of these over. Put them through like this. Bend the lead over. Bend the lead over. We have the little 330 there. And then one more of these. And then all we've got left is we've got the coupling capacitors, and then we have the power filtering capacitors, and we're done. Other than looking up that 168K resistor, it seems like I remember that wasn't populated unless you were using the volume control feature, which we're not going to be using. So hopefully that's the case, and I don't have to go try to hunt up a 68K resistor, which, knowing my luck, I probably don't have one. I hate it when I have to order just one little part like that and I have to pay the shipping. Now, somebody did tell me about a little trick. I can't remember whether it was DigiKey or Mauser, that they've got a policy where if you mail them a check, they don't charge you for shipping. I guess it's because they're not paying the credit card fees. But if you mail the order in, super old school. So if you're not in a hurry and you got stamps and all that stuff and you want to snail mail them your order with a check, they don't charge you the $7 shipping. I personally haven't tried it. I mean, I'm usually anxious to get my stuff and just want to order it online. To me, it's a lot easier that way. But I guess if you were going to order just 25 cents worth of resistors or something, it does seem like a huge waste. That's why I almost always wait till I'm, ordering $30 or $40 worth of parts at least. Or if I do just need one little part, I'll think ahead to other projects or things that, commonly use resistors and order, put together a larger order than just ordering that little tiny bit. Well, here's our RIAA network is all done. So next, we're going to, I got these little short stubby Nikon caps, which, I thought these would fit better than those little tall thin ones that came with the amp. And so negative goes that direction. So all we need to do is put those in and bend the leads over. Put that guy in and bend the leads over. So you can see this part's going to go pretty quick. And then all we have to do is install the coupling capacitors. And let me just double check that I am putting the right ones in here. 22 UF 400 volts. Yep. And the negative's all going in with the positive out. It's 22, 22, and a 22. Now the power supply uses a bunch of these too, but we're going to do the power supply board later because we need to keep it unpopulated for doing the fab work to get it installed in the chassis. So here we go. solder all these caps in place. And then one of the things I decided to do is I'm going to install all the coupling caps on the underside of the board. For one reason, they're fairly large, and I put the little standoffs on the board and put it in the chassis, and there's plenty of room underneath for them to hang out down there. And it gets them a little further away from the power supply. And it also gets them away from the heat of the tubes. The board itself is going to act kind of like a heat shield, you know, and the heat's going to rise up and go out in the gap between the tubes and the holes that we punched in the top of the chassis. Some people build their preamps with the tubes like all inside the chassis, and I think you could end up with heat getting trapped and cooking the capacitors, which is not a good thing. And there's that. We'll come back and snip these off. One thing I've learned to do just naturally is right when I'm fixing to snip the thing, I close my eyes. One time I had a little tail, little tiny piece flip up and go in my eye. And I mean, ideally, I guess from a safety perspective, you'd be wearing safety glasses, but I think just be careful. Like I said, maybe close your eyes when you're doing the last little snip in case the little piece does flip up. It's not going to get in your eye. The other two, there's two more little tiny electrolytic capacitors that are going to they're going to mount here, and it's got a place on the top of the board where if you had like axial lead ones, you could put them here. Not there, but here. But because that resistor's right there, I'm going to put them underneath. And the positive lead is on the inboard. So it's going to go positive and negative like that. And then same here. And I guess I could have put those other power capacitors on the underside too. But they're rated at pretty high temperature. I'm not as concerned about them. We got our coupling caps. We will have this board all assembled. We'll snip these off. Okay, so we have our 0.1 UF at a minimum of 250 volts, or not 0.1, it's a 1 UF at 250 volts, which is a pretty, again, we're using my favorites, these Mundorf aluminum oil caps, and these 1UF ones are pretty big. One of the things that I've seen online is that the shorter one is the outer shield of the capacitor, and so you want it going to the preceding stage. And so the signal's going this way through the amp. So if you're going to put it on the top, it would go like right there. But we're going to put it underneath, and these are not directional as far as the voltage anyway. And so we're just going to bend the leads up, do like a little 45-degree angle out of here. And we've got a bunch of holes to choose from. So you can kind of just bend these things up how I'm going to bend them up kind of like that, and then find a couple holes that look like they're going to work good for that. And again, you have this thing sit up just a little proud of the board. Now it's going to sit on there and want to push it up against the board. So we need to find anything. Just put a little piece of plastic folded up underneath there, just to give it a little gap while we solder this in place. And you may have your favorite caps that you want to use. These coupling caps, I mean, I really try to avoid snake oil stuff, but I've just really found they do sound better. I mean, I know when I say that, some people are like, "Bah, you're full of crap." I just think I really do think they do, and it may be all in my head, but if I think it sounds better, if it sounds better to me, then it sounds better to me, and we're not talking about a ton of money here. I mean, I've seen $500 and $600 coupling caps. I'm not going there. That's, I think, getting even the higher end Mundorf caps when they're talking about gold and silver foil and stuff. I'm just not sure there's any advantage over these kind of basic aluminum oil caps. So hold it up just a little bit like that. Bend the leads over. Get our little, fold up our little piece of plastic. Cellophane, stick it into there. Yep, it's going the right direction. It looks fabulous. So we got 4 more caps to solder in and we're all done. Then we can maybe do a little more fab work, and then do a little populating the power supply board. Then we can start connecting the boards together, and then I still got to fabricate up the bulkhead that's going to go between the power supply and the preamp. And then I've got high hopes this thing's going to be silent. Or at least that's our goal. And while we're rebuilding or building another one of these. Okay, then we have these little 0.01 UF caps that go right here. And they're going to go in this direction. Actually, no, I'm wrong. Yeah, the signal comes this way. So they're going to go, yeah, they're going to go this direction. And pretty much just bend the leads just over like that. And they're going to go in there. And we're going to have those guys kind of sit kind of like that. And bend those over. Now what we may do is solder this one in from this direction. It doesn't really matter which side of the board you solder it in, because you should be putting enough solder in where it flows all the way through and goes to the other side. Like that. And yep, got a little bit of solder poking out this side, so we did that just perfect. And then this one's going to go the opposite direction, like that. Bend those over. So use the first hole in the middle hole. Like that. And bend it over like that. And then we got one coupling cap left. Again, you want to make sure you don't get your soldering iron like right up next to that other cap there and end up just burning it up. Actually, if I've been thinking, if I was doing this over again, or like if you're doing this, I'd solder these in first and then those. And then once this is soldered, pull those up. They're just off the surface of the board like that. We have a little bit of gap underneath them like that. And like those both have a little gap underneath them. And the last ones we got to solder in. Okay, now these are some caps I've never used before, but I've heard really good things about them. They're not real expensive, especially when you don't need really high voltage. And they're these MyFlex copper foil caps. And these are good for 250 volts, which is what this says this needs to be. And it says it can be anywhere from a 0.1 to a 0.15. I think for good frequency response, you need to use a 0.15. So let's do these real quick before my battery runs out. And like I said, these are pretty big caps. And these wires are about as big as you could possibly get through this board with these braided copper wires. But they do just fit. So there's that one. Let me solder this guy in place. And I'm actually going to bump my heat up one notch and let my iron get up to that temp. This is a pretty large diameter wire we're soldering here. Let that flow in good. And there's that one. And there's that one. Looks really nice. And this is the outside foil, is that mark? And so you want it going towards the input signal. Just like that. Get that off. And then solder in this last one. Well, I heard the camera shut off right when I was soldering up the last of this last coupling capacitor lead, so it almost made it through getting the board soldered up. And there we go. Got it all finished up. Got our coupling capacitors on the underside here. Got these Myflexes, these Mundorfs. This thing should sound really sweet. And again, I need to look up this 68 K resistor. I'm not sure that I need to have that installed for our application, but if I do, I can find some. I'm probably going to be ordering some parts here for some of my other projects that I've got on the back burner as I'm building this thing. So anyway, hope you enjoyed these 3 videos. I know for some folks it's probably boring and they're don't have no interest in watching this, but I think some of you might really enjoy watching me just piece by piece soldering this thing together, especially if you're going to do it yourself and you've never done anything like this before, or you could go through and say, where did she say to put that? And, you know, might be helpful. So anyway, if you like my channel, please subscribe, please like the video, and I'll see you soon as we do some more fab work on the chassis as we build this EAR 834 Phono stage preamplifier. Have a great day.